might reconvene the meeting at 10:26, please. Are you all ready, Jess? Are you ready, Aaron? Thank you. All councillors present as per before the adjournment. So, Councillor Peoples, were you indicating you'd move to receive the workplace health safety report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Have a second, please. Councillor Plum, those in favour? Carried. Questions on this report, or Steve, anything to note? Or Brett, sorry, it's your report, sorry. Well, Brett Selly, councillors, any questions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just I noticed Aramac seems to have a higher incident report. Is assuming that's something you're addressing, sort of bring that down.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, there's potentially a couple of reasons. One is they're obviously reporting every incident. So in some instances that could be a reason why they're higher. And we certainly don't want an environment where people are hiding incidents. We've been doing a lot of communication in all our areas around safety, and shared with everyone the full year results when we went around to our last communication sessions. I did, with the Chief Engineer and the Deputy CEO, we did go back to Aramac and address the workforce a second time, because I understand there are some incidents happen that you can't avoid, hitting a kangaroo and things like that. But they did have one incident that was an extremely serious incident that could have been avoided. So that's since been addressed with them again. So but we certainly track the figures every month, and I would rather that we have a workforce that is happy to report things, so that we know exactly what's going on.
Question? 344. Somebody moved that we received the project report. I would imagine there'll be MPIs here. One. Yep. Councillor Plum moves that we receive it. Seconded. Councillor Gleeson. Those in favour? Carried. Questions? We've alluded to this somewhat. The funding source column has been updated to reflect a lot of projects still yet to be commenced. I believe you can see from that a substantial amount of plant, as per our plant replacement schedule, has already been things have been undertaken there. Is that correct, officers? Like at least 8 or 9 pieces of plant.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and there's even more since this report was distributed.
Yeah. Right, any other questions? I should be moved. Councillor Peoples back inside. Please. Can I have somebody move that we receive that report? Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Arthur. All those in favour? Barry? The background of this report is very clear. Brett, have you got anything to add?
The only policy that's not on there is our work cover. We're still waiting for that to come through.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With the us now taking on the pool, does this insurance cover the insurance we would actually need to have for this work?
The pool operator is a separate insurance. Probably us getting
To you, Mr Mayor, yes, that policy has been paid this year. It is a separate
It's
policy.
not included in this policy.
No, it's separate altogether. It was a policy of, it cost was just under $3,000.
Is that for all 5 bills?
No, that's just the one.
Just for that 4? What do we do in the other 14? Contractors pay their own insurance. Can we have
Contractors pay their own.
Aaron Borough?
Might have to take that on notice.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the insurance levels that we have, are they the minimum that we require, or are we above and beyond?
So the public liability is it's a local government mutual pool. So I shouldn't say all state government councils, but most councils are part of this pool. So it's a statewide policy, insurance policy that we contribute to. $600 million, which I think
Because
is at maximum, so that's a substantial amount for any council, no matter how large you were. In terms of all the others, so the insurance brokers, JLT, they come out, they visit us sort of earlier in the year. We go through all our assets, our risks. It probably takes a day of going through everything, and then basically you negotiate what levels you need, what levels of insurance.
Was there a particular element?
well, it's the lesser of the two values. Like the LGM liability is it's only 78,000 because it covers public liability, products liability, and professional indemnity. My understanding of the Act, we only need public liability and professional indemnity, 30 million for public liability and 10 million for professional indemnity.
That's any one instance.
So, but the product liability, is that why we've got $600 million worth of cover?
Right. No, I think it's just because it's a standard policy covering all councils that are a member. That's the level of
But is that standard fit for our purpose, or is it, that's just what we get given?
I think if you look at the indemnity on page 25, so I think that there's a difference between what the Act requires because that's in any one instance. They require that you have a policy to cover any one instance to that value. That $600 million is actually a aggregate. So we're covered for more than
Yeah, single one with multiple.
No. Multiple councils, but also multiple instances.
Yeah.
So we're meeting the minimum requirements of the Act, but we're not necessarily exceeding it, given your exposure risk could be that you might have to file 8 or 10 instances of a significant claim in a year. You'll end up at around that threshold of 600 million anyway.
Yeah.
And it may even be read in because it is a mutual policy, Brett. Does that 600 million cover? Is that eaten away by other councils if they have claims in that period? Being a mutual policy.
I'm not an expert on insurance system here.
With racing, there's a umbrella cover over all race clubs and everything through RQ and everything, and I think, yes, they do either way. If one club has it, it does affect other clubs. And the following year, you might have to pay a bigger premium because, say, Margie might pay a bigger premium because Dolby had an accident or something like that. And I know we've had issues with that through racing here.
And what's happening at the moment, we're actually getting a rebate. So if you see there, the actual premium's 87,000. And because the claims because there's a surplus in the fund because there hasn't been claims, we got a $9,000 rebate from last year. But as Councillor People said, if there's a whole heap of claims in 1 year, the next year we would have to put in more to cover the other councils. Yeah, it is a mutual fund, so it's.
Oh, and it's the lesser of the two insurance values that we have to pay.
So for example, there will potentially be an increase in the claim next year, in the rebate, in the premium next year, because Gundawindi Council has a significant case finding against them over failure to correctly warn motorists, and it's run. Someone might be able to help me, but it's a substantial. They took the case to court, TMR backed them off, and they still got overruled. So there's going to be a payout there, many hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, that hasn't been settled. So
Can I just go back to Councillor Hanson's point about those pools? Can we, because if something happened and we're got no insurance, I'd say but can we also check that our lessees have got insurance too? Because if something happens down there and they're not covered, that'll probably come back to us again.
I think that's conditional.
I was just going to let you know that I do know that the lessees or the contractors that we've got for Alpha and Jericho, they actually do their premiums each year with their insurance companies there as well. So they've got their own cover.
They're right?
Yes.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure that, I'm sure, but the cover it covers all our activities, including the pools. So this separate insurance that we pay is because we have a lessee. The lessee actually pays the reimbursement. When Barkey Pool had a lessee, they reimbursed us the cost of an insurance.
So if we don't
We've
have
got
a
our own
lesson,
staff, perhaps we don't need it, but I need to check that out.
Because
We just need to clarify that.
just as an example, Brett, I agree with you. I think you would be covered because even the volunteers on Harry Redford were covered.
Right, a couple of follow-up things there from insurance. Any further questions? One is just to check on the points that you've raised, Councillor Arthur. The other one's to check on pools. 346. And somebody moved that we, hang on, this is an endorsement, so it's how far.
You can get the other one.
These maps are in your agenda, but they're sideways, which is frustrating. Got to tip your head on the side to read. Questions, comments?
If you zoom in,
They're sideways.
No, don't.
So, Mr. Mayor, we've been participating in this cycle network for the last few years. So it's a transport and main roads network, once again statewide, and they've identified cycle routes through towns. So the three Alpha, Barcaldine and Aramac have a cycle route map. Butterborough and Jericho are deemed too small to be eligible to participate. So then we can apply for funding for any pathways that are on that map. So then the government, or TMR, is just asking us to confirm that they're the routes that we want to continue with for this year.
So are we still in priority A funding, or are we down to B, C or D?
We still have A, because we have to do Barcaldine, complete the Gidgee Street pathway, in Alpha with Shakespeare Street, and Aramac is Porter Street.
Who prioritised them?
TMR. Okay. But they did. So every year they consult.
No, I'm just curious because in some cases we go from A to D In Buckholden, we go from A to B, and then in Alpha, we go from A to C to D. There's no B priorities necessarily in every community.
That'd be based on TMR standards for cycle networks, just like road networks. So if the street would meet whatever that priority means in their standards.
All right, questions, comments, observations as to the location? Are we happy with where they've identified? I don't ride a push bike, so I'm not going to comment.
And we have, Mr. Mayor, we have applied for funding for those 3 streets this year's budget. But yes, the opportunity, it's sort of a bit back to front if they have already asked us to apply for the funding before the routes have been confirmed. So.
Right, so we in, councillors? Happy? Yeah. Can I have somebody move that we endorse the maps? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried 5-0. Thanks, Gary. You'll be up there. Someone's going to get their squat exercise in for the day. Three, 4, 7.
Mr. Mayor, this was raised by councillors at the last meeting, and as you can recall, we didn't know what the issue was. We weren't informed of the issue at that stage. We've subsequently found out what the issue was. We've met with GBA, who've given us the information. So basically the Jet A1 tank, which we installed 10 years ago, is due for its major service. So that's going to cost about $50,000.
One off.
On a 10-year.
Yep. So $5,000 a year. Well, no, it's not. It's one off, but it costs. You get 10 years out of $50,000, is what you're saying.
That's right.
But Mr. Mayor, I would assume that in 5 or 10 years' time, we have a similar inspection. The inspection levels for that sort of stuff doesn't decrease in time. Normally, it shortens in time. So if it's 10 years, I would assume there's a 20-year inspection, if not a 15. So we could potentially be up for another $50,000 in another 5 years' time, or $50,000 could be double that in another 10 years' time.
And Mr. Mayor, can I just ask, who are we supplying fuel for? Is it just the RFDS, or is it more than that, Brett?
Mainly RFDS.
So that's
The government jet.
Any private jets.
Any private jets, yeah, bigger aircraft. So any small aircraft just uses that gas.
sure.
Um,
And we sell the fuel. What happens with the fuel?
well, GVA sells it. So they
So we
operate it on our behalf. That was the agreement.
we do the maintenance on the tank, and GBA sell the fuel. Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask that this gets held over for a month if it's not that time sensitive? Because one, I think we need to look at, because when I asked last month, we were basically told that GBA totally controlled by them, not sure of an issue, council has nothing to do with the fuel operations. But if we own the 2 tanks, and unless it's contracted that all of those costs are with the contractor, then we do have some obligations out there. And if we've bought them and the contract doesn't cover that, how come we haven't got it budgeted for these inspection costs? If it's not part of the user agreement or the contract with the fuel provider.
So GBA provide all the fuel from both tanks, is that correct?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. So it's
We
pretty,
own the tanks, Mr Mayor.
yeah, so it's a pretty good deal. Paying someone 3 hours overtime to drive out there and fuel up 60 litres of fuel, I'd sooner not have to worry about that. Someone else is doing that they've been doing that for a long time at no cost to council, other than, yes, you're right, it has been correctly identified that there's an inspection cost come in at the 10-year mark, 10 years since it was installed, and that they're saying that maintenance cycle is 10 years for it, rather than, I mean, the volume of fuel we sell out of there wouldn't cover the wages to do it.
No, I'm not saying we take it over, Mr Mayor, but I don't know how much an avgas tank is worth, how much it cost 10 years ago.
Well, that's it. Sorry, it's not avgas, it's Jet A1.
Oh, well,
Avgas,
sorry.
Yeah.
A fuel tank.
Yeah.
It's $100,000.
Yeah, we discussed that, Mr Mayor, in talking to GBA, and the estimate was it'd be around 120,000 for a new tank, rather than do the inspection, just upgrade the tank. That was the rough estimate provided.
Mr Mayor, can we get better than a rough estimate?
The 50,000 could result in an upgrade requirement anyway, could it? Potentially. So we could spend 50,000 to inspect it and then still be up for a new tank or serious modifications. Correct.
Mr Mayor, my understanding is we've got an underground tank and an above ground tank. Do we need tanks that size? Can we have a look at, I don't know what the refueling schedule is, but can we have a smaller, cheaper tank? Is that $50,000? Can we investigate, is that $50,000 better towards a self-bunded above ground tank, like an isotainer or? I don't think we've got enough information to be informed by us at this stage.
I'd be nervous about spending 50,000 when we could then have to spend 120 on top of that. So I'm happy that we defer this until we see more detailed information.
The Jet A1 is above ground. The avgas is underground.
If the advice that we get after a preliminary look at it is that it's going to cost us nothing more, then it's probably a different proposition to then it's 50 followed by another 100, where all of a sudden we'd be better off just buying the new one. Let's get a detailed report on that for the next meeting. Someone move we defer that. Councillor Plum, second, and Councillor Arthur. Those in favour?
We don't want to lose our RFDs, do we?
I think we should even take advice on what RFDS services are.
Yeah.
My anecdotal evidence is there's actually only one RFDS plane that uses Jet A1. So, and is it a requirement? Like, let's just get the whole thing.
And, yeah, Mr Mayor, I think that's totally agree with you there. We might be spending $50,000 where we, don't sell hardly any fuel for the year either.
And if it's essential, we may be able to work with somebody to get it. Like if RFDS is the main use of it, they might be able to secure some funding for us, because that's unbudgeted, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Well deferred, council. 348.
Mr Mayor, at the planning workshop, councillors spoke about purchasing land off the state. As I mentioned earlier, we've met with DNR about this. I suppose this resolution is just to confirm which parcels we are applying to purchase. So the maps are attached. We've got land in Alpha Jericho, Barking, 2 lots in Aramac and Muttaburra.
So councillors, this is not a decision to acquire. This is a decision to apply to acquire, because the next stage is they came back, they will return to us with a price. Okay, so I think that will be relatively reasonable, except item 1 potentially. So I'm comfortable. The district manager for DNR, regional manager, did offer that we wanted to just get an indicative price on Alpha before we proceeded. I'm comfortable with the Deputy CEO's position that we apply, and we can still ask for that indicative price, because before we get the formal valuation back, we'll have a bit of an idea whether it's going to be scary or not, and we can start and take lobbying efforts the government to say, because in that case, it's our only option. There's nowhere else to move the town that doesn't flood, so.
And so just to clarify, Mr Mayor, that cost to apply is administrative hours and some paperwork.
There'd be a small fee.
$200 fee, so it's minimal fee. That's our only cash outlay, would be the fee to lodge the application. Then we wait anywhere between 3 and 6 months for a reply, and they'll come back with a indicative price. And then if you decide to go ahead, you have to pay a deposit, which may be 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever amount they set. Then you wait another however long, if native title, etc. has got to be completed. It could be 18 months if we actually pay the final price, get it freeholded. So
that's why when we come to our next workshop on planning, these parcels won't be zoned the way we want them to end up. It will form part of our strategic mapping that's what we intend for there. But at the point that our planning scheme is approved, they will still be whatever their current zone is, whatever zone is relevant to the title of that land, and then we will move what's called a major amendment to the Planning Act when this freeholding process is completed. As Brett said, potentially 6 to 8 months after we've actually adopted the town plan. So that's the process that these parcels of land then end up with zoning that we want them to long term. So do I have a resolution on the move, please, that we apply? Councillor Plum, Councillor Rogers. Any further debate? Being none, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? 7-0. Interim audit report 349. Can I have someone move that we receive the report? Councillor Arthur, Councillor Plum.
Mr Mayor, we received the interim report, audit report from the external auditors. We had an audit committee meeting yesterday to table that report. That report's been distributed to councillors.
Can I just make a point on that, please? Note the date on that. The letter was written to me on the 23rd of June. I didn't receive it until we got the agenda last week, so there's obviously an error in the date attached to that. We talked about it, Brett, you and I, you said it was possible.
So, Mr Mayor, it was the draft report, that's the date the draft report was prepared. And for various reasons, we only received the final version last week, but that is the date of the report. And I think that's important because that means that it's only reporting on activities up to that date. So if they reported it, they use last week's date, then it would have been activities that have happened since June that aren't reported on. So legally, they've only reported up to that date. Just a couple of pointers in that, councillors. You'll see that we've got 4 green traffic lights and 1 amber, which is a massive improvement on previous years. On page 5, I think we had red lights previously. And there's only 2 minor deficiencies that they've reported on this year. for the interim audit. So one is that this report has to be presented to council. So last year, we presented the final report to council.
Councillor Rogers, can you take the chair, please, for a moment? I just have to do something, read something. Sorry.
And this is a common thing that they've picked up across Queensland is that the interim report wasn't presented to council, but even though the final report was, apparently legally, the interim report also has to be presented to council, not just to the audit committee, which is what we did. And the other thing that they
Excuse me, Brett. The closing report doesn't have to be presented to council.
no, that's
That's,
I know the management letter gets presented to council. The closing report doesn't. We presented the closing report to council. We didn't present the interim report. Yeah, doesn't make sense, but that's.
It is a little bit cart before horse, yes.
So the other matter was just, I suppose, an internal finance thing in that when we purchase plant, we put it into work in progress and then we capitalise it. They're saying plant isn't work in progress. We just go straight to the assets. We just need to change the way we process plant when we purchase it. So they're the two things that they've identified so far, which I think is a good result. One interesting comment that they've identified on page 2 is that councils, Queensland councils, have 4,500 different legislative requirements they have to comply with. So, as management, we've got 4,500 legislative requirements. And so their issue now is they've raised, well, they want to get some sort of process of how can councils comply with all these requirements and how do you check that you are compliant?
and councillors.
Councillor, yeah, well, that's true. It's there was an officer from the Queensland Audit Office online, and he said that they're working on that. They did ask how we manage it. So just from experience, it's very difficult to know every piece of legislation changes all the time. They also raised, obviously with COVID, have to be careful what it's a risk, and it can affect a number of different things, different aspects of the financials. I think we're pretty safe out here in terms of our revenue, but if you're one of the coastal councils that relies on car parking, rent for your revenue, your revenue is going to take a major hit.
Yeah, well, we could too if we end up with it and we can't, and no one can work. We can't turn a wheel, we're in trouble too.
Yes, that's right. So we have a different risk.
Yeah.
They also raised about cyber security and people hacking into other council computers, which we know has happened to our neighbour. So that means they lost computers for 6 weeks. It's be pretty devastating. And I think just going through this still outdated, some things we still have to address, fraud risk. we haven't addressed that outstanding recommendation. Code of conduct and IT policy, well, that's now been adopted, so we can tick that one off. The inventory balances, that's been corrected. Asset management policies, we've adopted those, that can be ticked off as well. Work in progress, in terms of our capital, we're working on that one. Risk management, that's another work in progress, something that we have to address as well. And that's also been raised this week. We've got our safety, quality and environment auditor on site for the week. He's raised risk management as well as the financial auditors yesterday. So,
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, risk management,
throughout the whole organisation.
the whole organisation.
So it's not only, it's safety risks, computer risks, financial risks, every type of risk. Saying we need to have a plan.
And what sort of plan do you have for all those different areas?
Well, it's very difficult. And that's another person or another half a person that you need to manage that. So we're doing it in our own areas. So safety, we've got safety officers, technical officers, finance, but there's no whole of council plan that follow. That's what they're saying. We need to have a whole strategy about risk management.
And one final question, is there a template that maybe some other councils have got where they address this?
But that is the solution we need to, and I think it's across the board in Queensland. I don't related to us. Every council would do their own, as I said, safety or plant risk, financial, but we need to find a template. It'd be too hard to start from scratch.
Yeah.
The landfills provision, so that's been resolved. Flood damage, that's resolved. Key management personnel remuneration, that's been resolved. Indexation is resolved. Monthly management reports. Now we've got the new reports for the finance in your agenda, so that will resolve that one. It will partly resolve it. We still need to have internal monthly reports as well. Asset manager position, this has been raised numerous times by the auditors, and we're in the process of resolving that issue. Portable and attractive asset register, that will go with the asset manager's position. And KPO reporting, we're working with ETC for that one as well. So I think by the time the auditors come back in September, hopefully we'll be able to sign off on the majority of those items.
Thank you, Brett. Has anyone got any more questions?
Madam Deputy Mayor,
Councillor.
mouthful. The councillors that are on the audit committee, are they, you address the issue more, are you confident, happy with the way we're going with this?
All the results are there.
Yeah, but I mean, from a councillor's point of view, like we've heard Brett speak to the issue. I just wonder.
Councillor Arthur, I probably should say that my first meeting yesterday, but I think from what we heard at the meeting, everything. But yeah, I think you might have more to add.
It looked like The lights look good, 3 green lights, but it's the next, isn't it, the next few months that come into play that really might hinder him. But overall, everyone seems to be pretty happy. The Grant and Dalton, Kelvin and Andrew seem to be pretty happy with how everything's going. They'll be out here, they're actually driving out, aren't they, Brett? Can't fly, so they're going to drive. And one of them is the first time they'll be on dirt road, so you'll get there safely. But yeah, no, it's all good, isn't it? Brett?
Yes, councillor Plum.
Thank you.
Madam Deputy Mayor, the auditors did say up front that they were happy that they could see the improvement over the 4 years that they've been with us.
Also, is everyone happy to receive the report or put it back? Neil? The next thing on the agenda is the Alpha Airport.
So councillors, you'll hear about why I got away from the chair there for a moment. There'll be a minute later in the day. Sorry, Jess. I had no warning of it until literally 5 minutes ago, so we'll go into that in detail in a minute. Alpha Airport Resolution 3410. Discussion, and I think the report is pretty clear on this. Is there any further comment that's required?
Mr Mayor, I've got a question.
Yep.
Please. The different classification here between aircraft landing area and certified.
Yep.
Can you explain the different classification of them, please?
I probably can, but I'm going to defer to Brett because he's been dealing with this.
You might know more than me, Mr Mayor.
Somebody mark that day down. Somebody mark down today's date.
Mr Mayor, it relates to the usage of the airport. So certified airports were with the RPT services, so Qantas, where you've got a commercial aircraft landing. Then they had the regulated, which was the middle group, and I'm not sure why Alpha was in that group, historical. And then smaller airports are aircraft landing areas, so that was the third level.
So your aircraft landing areas, are they sort of just like any property at B now? Is that just, are they the same category?
No,
They're different again?
They're a lower category.
They're another category.
So we still have safety requirements at all levels, but it there is actually a table in the that CASA does that shows you what each category has to do. So thank you. Yeah, so certified airports are RPT, or frequent charter, with more than 30 passengers. So what was going to happen was the regulated airports, originally it was going to be, they would go back to being aircraft landing areas, unless they opted in to be certified, in which case they'd have to then go through a whole audit process. Someone obviously got to the government and said, this isn't fair. So they switched it around so that they automatically became certified, unless they chose not to be. So for certified, you've got, we have to do safety management systems, an annual technical inspection, a safety inspection, whereas the landing areas don't have to do those, although there are some recommendations. Certified has to comply with MOS 139, which is the manual of standards for airports, whereas landing areas don't, but there's a guidance for them, a separate standard.
Well, I'll pull you up, Brett. Is there any benefit for the Jericho, Aramac and Maryborough airports to be certified or not?
It cost us a lot of money because their inspections
See, they're not, so the reason we can get Alpha through as a certified now is because of the grandfathering that's been allowed with this legislation regulation change. It was in the area of, it was existing. It was in an existing category that now no longer exists. So you had the option, if you owned one of them strips, to go up or down without any further regulatory inspections. Like if you were to transition an airstrip that was not currently certified, for example, Aramac or Maryborough or Jericho, there's an inspection cost, upgrade costs, like everything from the standard of the windsock to the lighting to the whole deal. You got to go through it. So they weren't in that category. They haven't moved. They're not moving categories. The only one that had to move was either Alpha up or Alpha down.
Okay, so with this, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
And that therefore, because it was a grandfathering type arrangement, comes at no cost. But if we had downgraded it to an aircraft landing area and then wanted to upgrade it, there'd be significant costs involved in meeting the standards that are required today for a certified strip.
Okay. Brett just said there would be costs there to those other three smaller strips. So have we got a budget implication with the Alpha strip now?
Alpha was, well, what we were doing, it was getting inspected anyway as a registered airport. What we were doing with Jericho, Aramac and Maryborough was just alternating the inspections, so doing one a year rather than all three each year, just as a safety precaution. Which we would still do. So we still need to be, we're responsible for the airport, so we still need to get them inspected, but we wouldn't go through the full inspection every year.
In those aircraft landing areas, we're still fine with flying doctor and all that sort of stuff. There's no dramas there. That's good for me.
So this is not a downgrading of Jericho, Aramac and Maryborough. This is a maintenance, and it's not really even a downgrading of Alpha. It's leaving it in a category of aerodromes that require inspection, but without having to go to any significant cost. And I guess one of the reasons why it's, in my mind, a good idea to have left it there is the potential for future either sale or utilisation under a lease arrangement of that strip. If it's in the higher category of airstrip, then it markets better than if there's a significant sum of money work to be done by either us or a new owner to elevate that to a certified airdrome.
The only cost in the future for Alpha as a certified airport, and it applies to Barkey as well, but particularly for Alpha, is any upgrade has to comply with the new standards. So if you did new lighting, you can't just put back what's there, you have to upgrade it to whatever the current Australian standards are for lighting.
And at any point in time, council could have, if the cost to do an upgrade, so there was an essential upgrade an essential maintenance that was required, and we did have to, and to maintain certification, it required upgrading, and the cost wasn't there. Council could always elect that it revert back to an aircraft landing area. If commercial realities around that strip aren't realised in the next short period of time, then council may elect to do that anyway. Whereas once it's gone down, coming back costs hundreds of thousands.
So Alpha and Aramac were different categories previous, were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not privy to why. All I can think of is it'd be a legacy issue from the Alpha Jericho days where the Alpha strip was sealed before the Jericho strip. So it may have inadvertently ended up in a higher category of airdrome by basis of being sealed. That's the only thing I can think of why they were never, those two strips were categorised differently to each other.
No, well, I've just been thinking about the Alpha and the Aramac strip. I can't see a great deal of difference in both strips, at all.
You can walk from yours to town. You can't, well, you can from Alpha, but you wouldn't want to lug too much luggage with you.
I think what the issue the mayor raised was if any mining or any development happened in Alpha, we want to have that certified classification there.
Either as operators ourselves or as a tenant for another company to lease it, because those big air companies will only use certified strips.
Otherwise, you'd let it go back to aircraft landing area.
Right, somebody then move the endorsement or amended. Move Councillor Beagle, second to Councillor Hanson. Discussion? If none, go to the vote. 7-0. 3, 4, 1, 1.
Mayor, some councillors and CEO, myself, Jenny met with the Arid Land Botanic Garden group to discuss progress of their project. They once again raised about land tenure issues. So I am proposing that we allocate a parcel of land on page 40 of your agenda, lot 372, for that purpose of establishing the visitor information centre site for that project. The group obviously wants more than that. They want some sort of tenure over the actual sites where each ecosystem is, but at this stage, the recommendation is that we go with the first step, which is to give them a base that they can work from.
Can I get some clarity about exactly where that is?
So,
I can see the Landsborough Highway, that bit I get.
Other side of the field.
Ironwood Drive is.
Yes.
So there's a IOR fuel station on lot 33.
Right, okay. So Ironwood Drive is what separates those small blocks from 372. Is that right? Or is that on top of that?
On your map, page 40.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking.
Yes.
So that's there, not here.
Lot 33, Mr Mayor, is the IOR self-funded,
Yep.
and then there must be an easement.
Well, it's freehold land, but it was left there because we didn't know at the stage of developing the lots on Ironwood Drive. We didn't know what the use of the 371, 372 would be. So we wanted to leave some land in case we have to put services or a service road through. So that was.
So you're proposing 372 or 371?
372. 371 is the gun club.
Yeah.
Proposed gun club.
372 is currently a rest area.
No. 372 is scrub.
So it's below that. It's here. So that rest area that's there, that's the IOR, right? Gotcha. Right, thank you.
So the driveway into the IOR is Melaleuca Road.
Yep. Yep. So that there, is that there? Yep. The IOR's here. So that wide's that little strip of freehold land? About 30 metres.
30 metres, yes, which is a road reserve if we have to put a road
All right, open the floor for questions. Councillor Gleeson.
Is that, the southern boundary of that doesn't go down as far as that Leanfield Road, does it? You know, where the Leanfield access?
No,
It doesn't go that far, does it?
it's only
It's around
370 metres wide.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit behind. What do they propose to do with that area?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it might be good to get councillor Arthur or councillor Rogers, who attended the meeting, to also
Cameras are good for the big
share, a bit of a vision.
My understanding is that the interest of the group to gain some land then helps them to access funding and to encourage the project, I guess. Like they seem to be held up on being able to access grants because they don't have a base, more or less. They would like a physical presence and a physical address to then be able to market the idea, ask for funding, encourage people that might be interested in the species that are out there on the common that they believe have some significant ecological value. And the idea is to use that as as the name suggests, Arrowland Botanical Garden. So it will potentially bring in tourists, people that flower spot, bird spot, witches. But part of the plan is a seed growing area. There would be an interpretive centre, I would sort of understand, but although it's a long-winded project, the first real step is securing some land to be able to say, look, we've started, here we are, and then access to funding.
The original base site was on Barkey Downs Road.
Yeah.
That's town common, so this is freehold land, so our recommendation is they move their base to this site. Because it's freehold, council can allocate it. If they go town common, you have to go through the whole native title. Freehold.
Can I just make a couple of points there with regards to it being town common? I just don't know about that block of land there for the simple reason is you've got a fair bit of frontage to the Landsborough Highway. For possible future growth, Park Alden. I think that's a pretty important block if our town's to grow in the future. You might end up we don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years. You might end up with a Bunnings and a Harvey Norman or some sort of shopping precinct, I don't know, but that's right on the highway. It's probably about 36, 37 acres. It's a fair slab of land. I'm happy to have a look at little land off the common somewhere else, but I just don't know about that block.
Other questions, comments?
Do we have a rateable value on the land? Like, if we were to try and sell it, how much would council be looking to recover for a block that large in the current economic circumstances?
Not a property value, so I don't know. But it's 17.2 hectares, it's a fair block. There's 30 or 40 homes on acre blocks. No, you can put streets and services in, you'd 18 to 20 anyway.
Oh, it's about 36 acres. You'd probably get your 30. You're still going to have 6 acres for roads.
Yeah, anyway, not the others.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that block could probably sell as a one-piece block for the likes of what I brought. I could imagine you'd get well over 100, 200 grand for a block that size sold as one block. Quite easily. Just for lifestyle, I think.
Do they, so just looking at the resolution, so the council might not want to do it at all. But, so by allocating the land, is that the same wording as giving it to them, or is that just identifying that they can have it if they get their grants?
So their issue is,
Like,
yeah, they don't even have an entity yet that the land could be transferred into. What we established at that last meeting as well. So they need to get their group in order as well before anything can happen. Their question was that the previous council had indicated that there was a possibility of this land being allocated to them, and they are wanting some certainty.
So Mr Mayor, deliberately in the resolution use the word allocate so that it's allocated for the purpose of establishing the gardens, not allocated to a group. And then authorising the CEO to negotiate about tenure, which would then have to come back to council for any.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so where was their initial request for land? It was on the Barkle and Down Road.
on half the common.
No, but there was a site, I'm not sure how big, maybe similar to that was on that Barkey Downs Road
But they put their nursery and their car park and their visitor information centre type stuff.
and the other reason for bringing it closer to town is water and power. You've got those services, mobile phone, water tower. They're all water power. They're all accessible closer to town.
Village councillors, continue talking about it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think this is a good, if we're allocating it, we're not handing over the title to anyone. Also, the thing is, they may not need that whole 17 hectares, but if it's at least allocated, they might be able to go and chase some funding, or they've got a start. They are actually, after our meeting, they have organised now to go out and map that Botanical Gardens with Will Green. He's going to help because he knows how to do the geotagging, and they're going to start to try and raise the profile as a arid land garden so that people can come and get that map and actually go and walk or drive around that as it is now without spending really any money. So that will help them raise awareness and maybe get funding in the future for it. I'm happy to allocate that land. Like this motion as it is, to me, I'm quite happy to.
The other, Mr Mayor, the other point I'd make is that in our freeholding of land on the opposite side of the highway, so on page 31, we're looking at freeholding that parcel on the opposite side of the Landsborough Highway for future development.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor.
Councillor, please.
The lot number 371 that is on the western side of that lot, is that freehold? That's council freehold as well?
Yes.
Yes, and we have resolved to donate that to the gun club.
You said it, I apologise.
And that side, so that was one large parcel of land. So we've subdivided that. And the subdivision point is where is the amount of land that the gun club needed for their facility.
I know it's not a zoo or botanical gardens, in fact, it's complete opposite, but just neighbourly relations between a botanical garden and a gun club. Could make your walks on a Saturday morning interesting.
Well, Mr Mayor, the Botanica that's in the Botanical Gardens is spread through the common.
But this is the stoplight point, you're gonna get out of
Yes,
your car.
well, this is your start point, yeah.
You're gonna start like you walked into somewhere in Rwanda or Zimbabwe or something.
Well, I suppose if
May well add to your
Harvey Norman or whatever, if you put that there, that
They're stopping, they can't be allowed any alcohol now, and they're not allowed to drink alcohol before and after their shoots now, so they might be a bit safer.
so it wasn't safe before. Is that what you're saying?
Still doing it everywhere else, must only be here.
I've seen a few traps being hit.
Still fine to do it everywhere else.
Yeah, we'll see, I just.
Anyway, what are we doing here, councillors?
Mr Mayor, I still think that we should be going out a bit further and saving this block of land for future development of Mark Alden. And if co-councillors disagree with that, I probably still think that we should take a fair bit of that frontage surveyed off and just leave one block, probably on the southern corner of this block, as a entrance for the Arid Botanical Gardens, and keep the rest of that surveyed off for future council use or future town development. But I still think that the whole block should be hung on to for future town development. What they want to do here is to have a look at natives and what have you, so they've got them out there off the Bark Alden Downs Road anyway.
There's more than just inspection, like in fairness to the project, they want to develop a nursery where you can go and have a look at something and then buy a portion of it on the way out. Like this, it's not just a matter of walking around kicking the dirt. It's the scope of what they're trying to do. Now, I don't know whether there's a suitable block, I just think Brett's identified it because it's about the only freehold block that adjoins the common that's not allocated. It's
Through you,
purpose
Mr
freehold.
Mayor, this is actually future development if they get what they want. They want a gallery, they want a nursery and a tourist information like centre about the arid gardens, maybe a laboratory for scientists. Like they've got a big vision, but it is future development. But that they like the idea that it's out there on the highway as well, because that will be getting some of the flow from the traffic. But yeah, I agree they may not need that whole 17 hectares, but if we allocate a part of that parcel to their arid land project, I think, yeah,
I think they're talking about the information centre housing the Jenny Mace, aren't they? Jenny Mace.
I suggest that discussion could be part of that resolution. That fits with the resolution that we actually negotiate area of land that they need.
Add to the resolution around tenure, a bit about regarding the size or the area and tenure of land. Because, you know, we might be able to get away with giving them 2 blocks the size of that, say a block the size of that OIR, block 33, lot 33, we could cleave a section of that off for 372, but I couldn't support giving the whole block of 372. It's a massive piece of freehold in relatively good real estate. I think that's too much, but the location is probably, I agree with Councillor Rogers, there's bonuses to the location being where it is. We could develop a portion of land that's attached in that general vicinity of lot 372, but I'm probably comfortable with that. So where are we going, councillors?
can you take A out altogether? And just give the chief executive officer right to discuss and negotiate with the botanical gardens about what we might be able to do moving forward. Because really A is allocating lots 372.
Well, unless you amended that to allocates land at Melaleuca Road, Park Calden, in the bracket, a portion of lot a yet to be determined portion of lot 372.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Because until you do B, we don't know how much they really need anyway.
Yeah.
They might only want 2 or 3 acres. They might want 5 acres, but it's a lot less than 17 hectares. Councillor Plum,
I'm happy with that, Mr.
Can
Mayor.
Councillor Peebles.
Can I ask Councillor Plum if she's happy with that? Can we just put in the second part, the authorise the chief executive of the Park or Mayor regarding the area and tenure of the land which is suitable to both parties or something? To an outcome which is suitable to both parties.
And whatever that outcome is, Mr. Mayor, it has to come back to council for
Yeah.
approval.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Rogers.
I'm happy with that, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Do I have a mover? I do. Councillor Plum has moved that. Seconder, Councillor Hanson. Any further discussion? Press for the vote. Those in favour? 7-0. 351, financial report. Might somebody move to receive that report, please? Moved Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Hanson. Questions?
Mr. Mayor, the report consists of some of the old style reporting that's continued. That's the first pages 42 to 45. Then we've got an update on our grants, funding programs.
While you're on that, Councillor Arthur, we had a question about grant funding programs about an hour and a half ago. I asked you to hold it until now.
Oh, on the right-hand column, yes, where it says funding source. Predominantly they are single source. Some of them are multiple source. Is it too much trouble to get like a percentage split on them, or am I asking too much?
I think it's a different, I don't think they're multiple source. See where it says works for Queensland COVID? I think that refers to,
That's a single source, is it?
yeah, that's the COVID works for Queensland, whereas the works for Queensland is the pre-existing normal round of works for Queensland.
So they are normally single source.
They're all single source.
Not necessarily, but in this one,
Yeah.
yes, they are all single source.
So yeah, that's not 2 different funding sources.
Okay.
It's just 2 different lots of works for Queensland, identified separately.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Mr Mayor, like the sewage treatment plant grants, it's multiple sources, but you split them out. So they're 3
Yeah,
different
okay.
lines.
Yeah, different line item.
And red is, I'm assuming, not grouped yet. Sorry. The other one.
Yes, so council, to make it easier, I've split, when there's multiple sources, I've split the project up so that it makes it easier to read. As you can see, the LRCIP, there's numerous projects being allocated to that funding.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a question with that LRCIP, if you were to reallocate that money, can you actually reallocate it to something else?
Fits the criteria.
We'd have to apply to the government.
So once it's sort of been allocated here, you couldn't reallocate it somewhere else if you found another.
You can, it's, they don't like it, but
What's somewhat easier with it is if you reallocate it to another project that's already got an allocation.
yes.
I'm actually looking at the Barwon Cemetery and Nest Area fencing project. That's the specific one I'm looking at. The reason behind my thinking that is talking to a lot of tourists that are camping out there, they can't stay there, they're going to go to another town. And I feel if small towns, we need tourism naturally. Aramax is saying, because I've seen him at events on the river in Aramax on Sunday. And these ones out here do spend a fair bit of money in town, because I've seen them out plumbing gas bottles, all out of public cars of beer. They go to bakeries, they go to IGA, they go to the fuel stops, so they do spend quite considerable money in town. I feel if you stop them, they're going to go to Longwood or somewhere else, but we can't capitalise on that. So I'm actually against that piece.
Not that now's the time to move against it anyway, but
It isn't, but yeah.
just to use that as an example, so that's bundled together the cemetery fencing. So the cemetery fencing could outgrow the other one if you wanted to, like that's how you can move that without having to get approval.
Yeah, I picked up on because that specific question I had asked with that funding, so.
Yeah. When the rest area, it's interesting, I know they all say that, when the rest area in Alpha was, it's not a rest area at all, but when the area where they stopped on the side of the creek and the tourists couldn't stop there, the caravan park intake tripled. And they all said, we're not going to stop here, we're going somewhere else. They mightn't have, but someone still did behind them. Caravan park hasn't had occupancy like it since.
Yeah, that is a possibility, but the caravan parks most times are pretty full when they're all out there.
Our park hadn't been open for a fair period of time. The caravans, and it's still not full, is it, Jenny?
To be fair, no.
No, Mr Mayor, there's only half a dozen maybe in there.
So full, 20, I'm thinking of full as 22, not full, yeah.
No.
Yeah, anyway, can we discuss that in District Manager Buckle's report, please? It's more relevant to that area. No, we're not with necessarily the District Manager, mate. We'll do it when we get to the Buckle report. Sorry. Jenny, throw you under the bus there. Further financial reports? Questions?
So, Mr Mayor, then following on is all the new reporting, which Reese from QTC has designed for us. He's actually emailed me this morning, wanting some feedback from councillors on his report, or his style of reporting. So, because we've only got 1 month's figures, it's very hard to make a judgment. But so the first page is like a big picture overview of where we're at. Then we go into some trends, but once again, with one month, it's very difficult to pick up on a trend.
The one trend there, red is the infrastructure in the first one. You've got a couple of reds and then you've got the blue.
That's revenue, that.
The revenue and expenses. And so what one of the issues we've got is that to make this work, we have to do monthly budgets, because this is saying what's the variance between what's actually happened and what's your budget. Because we budget annually, and then the accounting system just divides the annual figure by 12 for each to get your monthly figure.
Okay.
Whereas in reality, it's not divided by 12. So we have to do a lot more work now to go back and make sure that our budget is divided up where we know it's going to be spent or when we're going to receive money. There is more work to be done there, and with 1 month it's very difficult because that infrastructure may have been just the total infrastructure budget divided by 12, which is your July figure, where we know that we're not going to get any money in July, really. Infrastructure money. It's going to come in later. So we need to go back and change the monthly budgets.
So help me here, please. We've got a infrastructure revenue of 400,000.
Over budget. That's not 400,000 in, that's just 400,000 over what we budgeted to have.
Of revenue.
Yep.
But then you come across to your expenditure, and we are about 1.6 in goal 3, and blue is underspent. So if we're 1.6 underspent and we're 400,000 over our budget, are we 2 million in front?
I think you're probably.
Because that's what it's saying. I'm
Yes.
not
Yeah.
saying we are, but that's what it's saying.
Yes,
isn't it?
that's right.
But in the reality, we're probably not. It's just that there's been money received that's got to cover, or we haven't spent as much on them because our bills are often quarterly or so forth.
I'm
That
only
hasn't
using
been
the
spread out.
exercise for understanding
Yeah,
it.
you're right. You're right. Once you get 3 or 4 months into it, if that's still saying that, then yes, you're 2 million in front.
And the real issue then, if that underspend is still there in, say, September, October, the alarm bells start ringing to say, well, how are we going to do all this work? If we haven't achieved what we're supposed to achieve to September, October, we're not going to meet our targets for the whole year.
Well, are we planning properly?
Yeah.
Yep,
So
those
that's,
sorts of things, yep.
it'll identify those issues.
All right.
And then,
Some feedback from me, Brett, I think it looks good, but I think we're just going to take a while to understand it.
yes, and I think with only 1 month, it's very difficult, but and then it just drills down further or deeper into each of the goals, and then deeper into each of the cost centres as you go further into the report.
And it draws attention in that area to note when things start to get over the percentage, look through it, and hopefully that flags for the officers then to put an explanation there as to why, which will make the questions a bit more streamlined.
And the last 2 pages, it goes back to your big picture again. So that gives you the statement of cash flows. So if you're interested in cash, what's happening, that's there, and your balance sheet. So, that's the 2 big picture statements, which, if you're only focused on the big picture, they're the 2 things you'd be looking at.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Brett, one other, just an example, when you go back to those first couple of pages, exception reporting.
Yep, so that's where we, as officers, have to fill in
If something
explanations.
explanations, okay. That's what
So we obviously haven't done that for the first month.
No, understand.
Well,
Nothing will be flagged.
So from now on,
If you've got something we should know, you'll have that
yes,
in there.
that's where we need to fill in, give an explanation.
Right, further questions? There being none, all in favour of receiving the report, I'm not sure that we did that. 7-0. Um, 361, and then probably a mayoral minute. before we go into the tenders before lunch. Yeah. A minute. Yeah. All over the deputy right? So we will now go to 361. Can I have somebody move that we receive Rick's report? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Hanson. Remind me where the MPIs are here, please.
3 and 5.
3 and 5, and are you in here at all? No, because depending on the
Not unless
questions.
the
Right.
discussion takes a tact on not expecting Mr.
Rick, have you
Mayor.
got anything you'd like to draw our attention to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're still bedding down the TMR projects on Capricorn Highway and Clermont Alpha. So I'm unable to provide a head of works program yet until they sort it out on where they're going to fit. But it is fair to say that we have a lot of work in front of us over the next few years.
Okay.
The only other one that I would draw people's attention to, councillors, is the flood damage 2020. That's going to be assessed on the 31st of August. It's looking like $20 million now after the initial assessment from QRA. So originally we were looking at 5 to 10. They've gone through their assessments. We thought that the 19 and 20 stuff would overlap somewhat, but there was less overlaps than what we thought there were. So now it's looking like 20 million. That'll be confirmed in the next couple of weeks. QRA come out and do the in-field assessment, and then we'll get confirmation of that the following weeks in September.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well done, Rick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, do we have a time limit on spending that money? I presume we would.
We've received extensions to the 2018 and 2019 flood damage of 12 months. And we've received an indication that we'll get this extended by 12 months as well. So we'll have 3 years to do this work. So we've got more than 3 years solid work in front of council at the moment.
The good thing I see about it is for any roads where there hasn't been significant works undertaken, if there's areas that require attention from both events, you might be able to do them now at the same time. Potentially.
Yeah, as soon as that's approved.
As soon as it's approved, yeah. Obviously, there's roads that we've already started work on and we're going to have to go back to, and that's just part of the course, but
We couldn't wait.
no. At that point, we'll make sure we're going to get an extension for any of it. All right, I'll ask, is there going to be any questions around goals 3 and 5? So Gary have to leave. There's not any questions, Gary, so sit down. I'm now going to close the meeting. I will move that we move into closed session for the purposes of discussing the Merrill Minute with respect to the Barcaldine Recreation Park. So if councillors wish to declare an MPI, this is your opportunity to do so. Councillor Plum is declaring an MPI on the basis of what, councillor?
Well, it depends what you're going to do.
Yeah, what you have previously.
Yeah. So it's, I'm talking about issues, the Merrill Minute will be relating to issues around water. Not flooding, but it is recreation park related. You've got both a flooding and a supply aspect, Councillor Plum.
That's whether it comes out of the tap or it comes down the river.
So it's not Mr. Mayor, it's not a material supply or a construction issue that might see myself with an MPI, or won't know until we discuss it, or if I leave the room, we've still got your quorum.
It deals with water supply to the rec park.
I might go on the side of caution.
I'm just thinking your plumbing connections.
Yes. Yeah, possibly.
I'm a bit stretch.
What are you going to do? Walk out too? So, as our staff and officers, I'm comfortable with you remaining. Can I move after we have councillors Plum, Peoples, and ARPA have declared MPIs for the basis of their business or employment opportunities. We'll have to fix it up later, Jess, because it's a late declaration. I'm sorry about that. Okay, now, given it's my reasons for you to go into closed session, I'm happy to move that from the chair. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried 4-0.